Hi everybody, Terry Ryder from Hotspotting. Tim Lawless from CoreLogic wrote recently that roughly half of the sub-regions of Australia have rising house prices, including about 40% of the sub-regions that exist in our capital cities and around 60% of the sub-regions that are in the regional areas outside of the capital cities, which tells us that most of the strong growth markets around Australia at the moment are actually in regional Australia. And one of the examples of rising markets out in the regions is the Sunshine Coast in Queensland. I've just completed a research exercise which included making a list of all the regional areas, Queensland, where double-digit growth in median house prices is taking place in the last 12 months, but including those areas which have also had meaningful growth in the most recent quarter, which means that prices are still rising. And suburbs in the Sunshine Coast region absolutely dominated that list. I'm happy to say that we forecast it based on the massive pipeline of infrastructure projects and other big developments that have been happening on the Sunshine Coast and are still happening. We've been shouting about the looming growth in this market for the last 2 years, and it's really starting to show up in the price growth data for suburbs right across the Sunshine Coast region. So it's because $20 billion is being invested in what's a relatively small regional city population, sort of 350,000 roughly, and that kind of investment, many of which has either happened or is underway right now, inevitably is going to produce growth in the residential property market unless developers saturate the market with too much new product, and that hasn't happened, certainly not to date, in the Sunshine Coast market. So prices are growing. I was at a Sydney seminar last week and I met a developer who's got a project on the Sunshine Coast right now, and they've sold the top floor penthouse for $6 million and the apartment on the floor below that for $5.7 million. And those are really strong numbers for a location like the Sunshine Coast, and indicates that it's a very strong market at the moment. Noosa, which is obviously well known around the country as an iconic holiday location, but has actually been an underachiever in real estate growth for the last 5 or 10 years, but it has returned to growth recently and strongly. In annual terms, the median house price for Noosa is up 14% and the median apartment price is up 12%, according to CoreLogic data. And nearby locations such as Noosaville and Taunton have grown 11% in annual terms. Not far further south from Noosa Heads, we have Sunshine Beach, which is up 17% with its median house price, and the typical house there now sells for about $1.5 million. Nearby Sunrise Beach has also had strong growth, and then heading further south again, we've got Coolum Beach, where the median house price is up 12%, and nearby Mount Coolum is up 22% in 12 months, indicative of really strong growth in that part of the market. There's actually a very long list of other Sunshine Coast locations right down the coastal strip and also in some of the inland hinterland areas that have had annual growth above 10%. The star performer is the upmarket water-based suburb in the central Sunshine Coast of Minyama, where according to the CoreLogic figures, the median house price has risen 46% to 1.3 million in the last 12 months. Now, a little bit skeptical when I see growth figures like that. Sometimes they can be a statistical aberration, but I checked out the growth numbers from other research sources, and a number of them confirmed growth of that order. So it's a market that's obviously proving very popular, attracting a large number of sales, and prices have risen a lot. Now, why is all this happening? Well, it's because of the billions of dollars that have been pumped into the local economy and infrastructure spending, such as the new $2 billion university hospital and the adjoining private hospital. Those sorts of developments, which are now finished, have brought a lot of new people to the Sunshine Coast to work in those facilities, and many of them are very highly paid people, so they're looking for really good quality real estate to live in or to rent, and that's pushed prices up, and that's a process that's ongoing. So the Sunshine Coast, one of the really strong examples of regional markets that are leading the way in terms of answering the question, where you find growth in the current market. We know that Sydney and Melbourne are winding down. Media is telling us the prices are falling everywhere. It's not true. The analysis shows that in roughly half the sub-regions of Australia, prices are rising, and the Sunshine Coast right now is a very strong example of that. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from Hotspotting signing off. We'll do it all again soon.